Finally, the truth about the Palestine question. It is my informed conviction that the true scope of the Israel Palestine conflict cannot be understood if you look at this region alone. The issue is a much wider one and its scope is much larger than it would appear on the surface of it. If you want to understand this issue in its wider ramifications, what you have to do is to look at the Russia Ukraine scenario. That confrontation was precipitated by the compulsions of geopolitics, in which America and the NATO powers were trying to surround Russia for whatever ideological, geopolitical purposes and compulsions by expanding the NATO influence around Russia, of which Ukraine was envisaged to be the last frontier, the final frontier. And Putin read the scenario right and decided to check it at all costs. I'm not justifying what Putin has done, I'm simply describing the factual matrix of the situation. If you look at the relative position of the United States of America and Russia, both have their own histories and both were the centers of global influence when the world was truly bipolar. Then, consequently, in 1989, the global scenario became unipolar. The loss of the preeminence that USSR suffered, and as the most significant part of the erstwhile USSR, Russia, feels the insult and the global marginalization, so to speak, that it suffered in the process. And Putin has vowed to return Russia to its old position of glory. Now, if you compare Russia and the United States, there is a huge asymmetry which needs to be understood. America has its military centers, its spheres of influence all over the world. NATO has been expanding to an unprecedented extent, and it's far easier for America to reach Russia in terms of destructive military power than it is for Russia to reach America. So, in the initial stages, Russia tried to compensate for this by increasing its destructive arsenal, particularly the nuclear arsenal. That's the reason why Russia, though a much smaller country in terms of economy and not in terms of geographical territory, economy and population as compared to America, it has a much larger, certainly larger arsenal of nuclear warheads. But that has proved to be inadequate. And therefore, in order to counter the spreading, outwardly expanding US come NATO influence, Putin deemed it necessary to prevent Ukraine from becoming a NATO province. Hence, the attack that was launched on it, with the consequences to follow. Certainly, Putin miscalculated. He thought he could prevail over Ukraine in a few days' time, at least a few weeks' time, certainly not more than that. Now, what has happened after that is history. Now, cut into the Israel Palestine conflict. The real players in this scenario are not the Jews and the Palestinians. The real players are Israel and Iran. That's the only way to understand this issue. The tussle in this region is for geopolitical hegemony as to who will exercise it. Will Iran exercise it, given its very exalted history of cultural renaissance and religious renaissance and its high voltage ambitions and so on and so forth? Or will Israel, a very minuscule country, half the size of Kerala, dominate this entire region? And Israel under Benjamin Netanyahu has been trying to spread around. With the help initially of Trump, the Abrahamic Accord was created, and gradually Saudi Arabia was coming into the sphere of influence. And because of Israeli economy, Israeli preeminence in technology, Israeli expertise in agriculture, which is very important for this entire region, and now, of course, in artificial intelligence, apart from its huge superiority in arms technology, Arab countries began to feel increasingly attracted towards and drawn into the political orbit of Israel, and this was not a development, a significance of which was likely to be lost on Iran. So Iran has been, in its own way, trying to compensate for this by creating what it called the axis of resistance. So if you look at the strategy embedded in the axis of resistance, it's precisely the strategy that America used to hem around USSR by creating its pockets of influence, if you like, its subsidies or its proxies, which is a more favored word in international parlance. So the American proxies all over within easy distance of Russia. And imagine the next door neighbor, Ukraine, also becoming an American proxy or a NATO proxy. Now, that is something which Russia could not but have taken a very serious view of. The same thing happens here. What Iran has been doing is to spread around its proxies surrounding the small state of Israel. For example, in the immediate neighborhood, there is Gaza, with Hamas dominating, armed to the teeth by Iran, financed by Iran, to a certain extent by other Arab countries, particularly the Qataris. Qataris have this wonderful habit of financing both sides. And then a little beyond that, you have Lebanon, which Hezbollah has virtually annexed. The civilian government has lost its control over Lebanon completely, a country of such great cultural renaissance. And I associate the name of Lebanon with my favorite author, one of my favorite authors, Khalil Gibran, his book, The Prophet, and also his many parables, beautiful parables, have been a source of inspiration for me. So I feel spiritually akin to Lebanon. So there, the Hezbollah has been supported very generously, armed, trained, equipped with extremely destructive military arsenal. And it's very symbolically very significant that when Israel attacked the suburb of Beirut, the attack in which Hassan Nasrallah was killed, there was a very senior Irani general along with Nasrallah. He was also killed, though the media is not really reporting it with the prominence it deserves. And I am inclined to think that Israel strategically chose this moment of attack. They could have attacked on other occasions, but they chose precisely this moment when Nasrallah would be seen as having died in the company of an Iranian general. Iran has not uttered a word about it. They can't. So you have Gaza, Hamas, you have Lebanon, Hezbollah. Now they are very, very close to Israel. Then you have Iranian proxies in Iraq. the Shia proxies uh, in Iraq, who are also armed and financed by Iran. And then at a slight distance, you have Yemen, the Houthis, and then of course you have Iran. So this whole ring of insecurity around Israel, and all of them having pledged to wipe out Israel from the face of the earth, not once, not 10 times, 100 times. Whether they should do it or should not do it, I have no opinion. But I'm saying this exactly what has happened. And this is part of history. Nobody can deny facts. Now, what aggravates this problem much, much further is the Iranian quest for a nuclear bomb. As of now, the Islamic bomb is concentrated in just one country, that's Pakistan. And Pakistan is under the American influence, though Imran Khan, in his own way, tried to sort of wean his country away from the American influence. He tried to gravitate towards Russia and China. And Imran Khan was with Putin when the invasion of Ukraine was unleashed by Putin. That again is very symbolic. So that Pakistan nuclear bomb is, strictly speaking, not Islamic bomb. The nuclear power, nuclear arsenal will become truly Islamic only if Iran commands that technology or Iran has nuclear bomb. So this has become the major source of international tension. And if you remember the speech that Benjamin Netanyahu made at the United Nations General Assembly last year, not this time, but exactly a year ago, the one thing that he stated with extreme emphasis is that Israel will not allow Iran to become a nuclear armed state. It will not allow Iran to develop an atom bomb. And I stated this as a matter of possibility a year ago in the video I made then, and I stated with even greater conviction today that the real issue in all of this is whether or not Iran should have an atom bomb. And therefore, you will see Israel trying its level best to drag Iran into this regional war, irrespective of what America says or irrespective of what America sincerely desires, irrespective of what the European countries want or proclaim or instruct or exhort. I am personally convinced that a regional conflagration is unavoidable. But this can happen in two different ways. One is a regional conflagration breaking out in the immediate horizon, say within the next 3 months, wherein Iran gets directly involved. You would have noticed by now that in spite of repeated provocation and serious provocations at that, Iran has been holding back. Many political thinkers, far better informed than I am, thought Iran would really get into the fray after Ismail Haniyeh, the number 2 in the Hamas hierarchy, was killed in the capital of Iran. A more frontal assault on the sovereignty of a nation cannot be imagined than killing a very major political representative who is a guest of the state, and that too on an occasion as auspicious as a swearing in of the new president of Iran. Now, that was certainly provocation serious enough to warrant a much bigger reaction, far more convincing on the part of Iran than was undertaken. Yes, Iran did react, but it reacted in a very choreographed, theatrical manner, but by giving sufficient advance notice to America and by America to Israel for all parties concerned to be thoroughly prepared to intercept the missiles that Iran would send. Some 300 missiles and rockets of various description were sent hardly any damage was done as was expected and as was meant to be. So it's obvious from all of this that Iran is rather reluctant to get into the fray at this time. At the same time, Iran wants to keep Israel bleeding. My reading is Iran wants to use Lebanon exactly as America, NATO powers, and European countries are using Ukraine in relation to Russia. Ukraine is being used, Ukraine is being supported financially, militarily, logistically, intelligence gathering wise, etc., so as to prolong this conflict and not really to help the people of Ukraine. And I consider this to be highly immoral. The people of Ukraine, Ukrainians are becoming mere worthless pawns on the chessboard of political tussle. And Russia, realizing this, knowing that it has to do the long term battle, has created its own strategy. So it has created a supply chain for its army. There is North Korea, a country that knows only to make military hardware and not even farm their lands. And Iran, of course, is a major player in this. And gradually, Russia is spreading its influence among Arab countries. It has reached out to several African countries, particularly South Africa, which has great preeminence over other countries, other than Nigeria, perhaps. So, a kind of global reconfiguration of political alliances is taking place at this time. And the situation in Lebanon, particularly, must be understood in this light. I believe that of the two scenarios, the first of which I have mentioned, the other is that Lebanon will be kept as a kind of running sore or unhealing ulcer for Israel, so that Israel's tremendous and enviable achievements in the economic front, the technology front, and even its military superiority over several nations in the region put together can be crippled over a period of time. This is what's called the waiting game. A waiting game till a time comes, a stage is reached, hopefully, when it would be opportune to mount an all-out war attack and destroy Israel completely. This could well be the calculation working behind the very strategic thinking in Iran. And therefore, what Iran is likely to do now is to try and see how the Hezbollah can be re-equipped, reorganized, replenished, both in terms of financial help and in terms of arms supplies. And Iran is sure to launch a recruitment drive of volunteers to go and fight alongside the Hezbollah in case Israel commits the fatal folly of undertaking a land operation, a land campaign into Lebanon. I sincerely hope that it doesn't happen, but I would say that the chance of this happening is about 80%. I tell you why. I read the whole situation in light of the very major distortion of the Jewish psyche, the Israeli psyche, that happened on account of the October 7 massacre, Hezbollah led massacre in Israel. Perhaps the extent to which this has hurt the Israeli psyche is not adequately understood. To the extent that I can intuit, there is not much material available on the subject, as you know. But to the extent I can intuit, and I have been somewhat of an astute student of Jewish history, Jewish culture, Jewish religion, spread over at least 2 millennia. I can tell you one thing. This particular attack on the 7th of October 2013 has changed the Jewish psyche forever. It has virtually upset the balance of the Jewish mind. Today, the Jews are not able to think rationally. Both sides of the equation, the Jews within Israel, all over the country, are now polarized. The far right, fundamentalist, extremist Jewish outlook. They want all out war, they want no holds barred encounters, they want to eliminate the enemy so that they can live in peace. The other half somehow wants to hold on desperately to the receding, evaporating possibility of peace, peaceful coexistence. I'm firmly of the opinion that at least in my generation, in the next generation, maybe the next 2 generations, peaceful coexistence between the Jews and the Palestinians is simply impossible. Impossible. So the Jews who really believe that by holding out the white flag and talking pacifism, they can create a climate favorable to realize their dream of peaceful and harassed existence can be realized is they are is are living in the fool's paradise. They're out of touch with reality, and that is because the Jewish mind is unhinged. Both sides of the Jewish equation are irrational, and that's the pathos of the Jewish predicament. The Jews today are in a far worse plight than I would say they ever were, barring a short spell of the Holocaust. A year ago, I said emphatically in the 2 videos that I shared with you in this channel that the Jews are not going to recover from this event. That Jews all over the world are going to live for the rest of their life in utter insecurity. They will be in a sort of house arrest. And those within the Jewish land, those in Israel, will also not live in peace. Because after all, it doesn't take much to ruin the peace of a people. All it takes is just a distant firing of a missile from a distance. The Houthis can do it. The Iraqi proxies can do it. Well, Hezbollah from any nook and corner of Lebanon can do it. Even from Gaza, it is possible. Even after 1 year of highly destructive warfare, rockets are still being fired from Gaza towards Israel. There is no peace. So, in all of this, what's happening really is an ongoing but undeclared war of dominance between Israel and Iran. And it is in the interest of Iran to ensure that the Lebanese question is not settled but kept boiling or burning. And the main thrust of the Iranian policy in this regard will be to keep Lebanon as a running sore on the neck of Israel. And look at the devastation that Israel is suffering from. Some 70,000 Jews displaced from the northern frontier on account of attack by Hezbollah. They had to migrate. They are internally displaced persons and they are accommodated at the expense of the government. And I think each month a family is sustained. It costs the government about $60,000. It's not a small thing. And then think of the cessation of the economic activities, not cessation, the slowing down of the economy of Israel. Israel doesn't have much of a standing army. Its fighting force comprises largely reservists. And reservists means people who are actually working in other fields. Maybe a farmer, maybe a clerk, maybe a bureaucrat, maybe a doctor, maybe an engineer, whatever, maybe a restaurant owner. I remember one of the funny episodes in the 1967 Israel-Arab conflict was a much wider conflict. Was that when the reservists were called up, one of them was a restaurant owner in Tel Aviv. So he was a tank driver, and he hung out an advertisement, a notice on his tank. The notice read, going to open a branch in Cairo. Going to open a branch in Cairo. So anyway, such things do happen. So this is not a scenario that Israel can sustain over time, whereas it doesn't cost Iran much at all to sustain it for 10 years, 20 years. In fact, it is advantageous to Iran to prolong this conflict, and therefore I don't expect the Lebanon situation to settle down in any time soon. It will go on and on and on, and Israel will realize that it is on a bus ride to nowhere, irrespective of the flattering successes and almost magical achievements it is making today. I am saying this right in the midst of, standing right on the peak of Israeli achievements. If my sense of history tells me anything at all, it augurs very, very ill for Israel to be in the state. Now, does Israel have any other option? Perhaps not. And that's why I'm saying there's a lot of pathos in the Jewish predicament today. If you look at the history of the Jews, you will come to the immediate conclusion that there is no other race known to us that has suffered as much as the Jews have done. Imagine being cast out of the homeland and made to spread around like wandering people over the face of the earth for 2,000 years. Also, imagine being persecuted wherever they went, and persecuted precisely for their competence, their merit, their genius, for their success. The most despised, the most tormented, the most segregated, the most sinned against people in human history are the Jews. And it reached its climax with Hitler's Holocaust. But their entire history, at least for 2,000 years, was one kind of a low-grade Holocaust. So, unfortunately, the people in this region seem to be not entitled to living in peace. That's the reason why I said yesterday in the video I shared with you that the bombs that fell on Beirut fell on me as well. It's not a question of taking the side of one party to this conflict. After all, it takes two to tango. In this kind of scenario, it cannot be that one party is a saint and the other party is a villain. I'm not naive enough. I'm not a kindergarten child to think that historical situations of conflict can be understood in terms of black and white, good and evil. No, it takes both sides. But unfortunately, what people do under the best of their convictions, persuasions, assumptions, at the zenith of their wisdom, very often in history has turned out to be their own undoing. That's why St. Paul, when he writes to Romans, church in Rome, the high culture of the times, has this very interesting statement to make on that I'll close. He says, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Many people who seem to be very smart, many people who think that they know the ultimate secret of history and they can play God to history, they have ended up as silent footnotes to history. And I actually give credit to President Joe Biden. When a year ago he told the Prime Minister of Israel, do not invade Gaza. You will regret it. America committed this mistake, he said. He said, America committed this mistake. And we have come to realize that to be a serious blunder. Please don't get into this. It's a bloody mess. But as Shakespeare says, wisdom is like a dog that stands and barks in the street. Who wants to listen to the dog? Thank you. All the best. Shanti, 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 Shanti. Jesus said, my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, but my peace I give unto you.